After this order's again given me to attend interrogations at Plantation House twice a week, 27th, a letter sent by Major Goriker informing me that I had been expected yesterday at Plantation House and ordering me there this day. On my arrival, I saw Mr. Baxter, to whom, after some conversation about Napoleon's complaint, I communicated my positive determination never to come again to the governor at Plantation House or attend him elsewhere if a repetition of the scandalous treatment I had met with on the 18th again occurred. That this I was determined upon, whatever might be the consequence. January 1st, 1818, Napoleon, nearly the same state as yesterday. Some conversation took place upon Mr. Hobhouse's book, which, as has been already stated, had been sent by the author and detained by Sir Hudson Lowe. I said that it had been seen by accident in Sir Hudson's library by the person who had acquainted him, Napoleon, with the circumstance. It was Batiste, and the governor, said he, after he had illegally detained it, to leave it where any person might see it. In Cardinal Richelieu's time, a nobleman who waited upon him about some affairs and asked some favor was ushered into his private cabinet. While they were conversing together, a great personage was announced and entered the room. After some conversation with Richelieu, the great man took his leave, and the cardinal, in compliment to him, attended him to his carriage, forgetting that he had left the other alone in the cabinet. On his return to his cabinet, he rung a bell. One of his confidential secretaries entered, to whom he whispered something. He then conversed with the other very freely, appearing to take an interest in his affairs, kept him in conversation for a short time, accompanied him to the door, shook hands, and took leave in the most friendly way, telling him that he might make his mind easy, as he had determined to provide for him. The poor man departed, highly satisfied and full of thanks and gratitude. As he was going out the door, he was arrested, not allowed to speak to any person, and conveyed in a coach to the Bastille, where he was kept au secret for 10 years, at the expiration of which time the cardinal sent for him, and expressed his great regret at having been obliged to adopt the step he had taken, that he had no cause of complaint against him. On the contrary, that he believed him to be a good subject to his majesty, but the fact was, he had left a paper on the table when he quitted the room containing state secrets of vast importance, which he was afraid he might have perused in his absence, that the safety of the kingdom demanded that they should not be divulged, and obliged him to adopt measures to prevent the possibility of the contents being known. That as soon as the safety of the country had permitted, he had released him, was sorry, and begged his pardon for the uneasiness he had caused him, and would be happy to make him some amends. Some sentiments relative to the French Revolution were also delivered by Napoleon, and arguments in favor of the validity of the imperial title the Republic sent to and received from all the powers of Europe. It was sanctioned by the will of the people, by victory, by religion, and by all the nations of Europe. Louis, driven from one state to another, was at last obliged to seek for refuge in England, but was received there as a private person, and on the express stipulation that he should only assume the title of the Count de Lille. None of the powers ever acknowledged Louis XVII or Louis XVIII. Every legitimate government cancels the right and legitimacy of the government which precedes it. The French Revolution was a general movement of the mass of the nation against the privileged classes. The nobles retained the higher and the inferior justice and other feudal rights under various forms, enjoyed the privilege of being exempt from the burdens of the community, and exclusively possessed all honorable employments. The chief object of the revolution was to destroy those privileges and abuses, to abolish the manorial courts, suppress the remains of the ancient slavery of the people, and subject all citizens equally to bear the expenses of the state. It established equality of rights. Any citizen might succeed to any employment according to his talents. Before it, France was composed of provinces differently divided and unequal in extent and in population. They had a great number of legal customs and peculiar laws for the administration of civil as well as criminal justice. She was an assemblage of several states without amalgamation. The revolution destroyed all those little nations and formed a new one, there was one France with a homogeneous division of territory, the same civil and criminal laws, and the same regulations for taxes. There no longer remain any trace of the ancient privileges of the provinces, their ancient sovereigns, or ancient parliaments. One half of the territory had changed proprietors. France presented the spectacle of 30 millions of inhabitants circumscribed in natural limits, composed of one class of citizens and governed by one law, one regulation, one order. Subsequently, the French nation established the imperial throne and placed me upon it. No person ever ascended a throne with more legitimate rights. The throne of France was granted before to Hugh Capet by a few bishops and nobles. The imperial throne was given to me by the desire of the people, whose wishes were 3 times verified in a solemn manner. The Pope crossed the Alps to crown and anoint me. Kings hastened to acknowledge me. England acknowledged the Republic and sent ambassadors to the first consul before she violated the Peace of Amiens. The English ministers offered through Maouet to acknowledge me as King of France if I would agree to the cession of Malta. And in 1806, Lord Lauderdale came to Paris to treat for peace between the King of Great Britain and the Emperor Napoleon, exchanged his powers, and negotiated with the plenipotentiary of the Emperor. If Fox had lived, peace would have been made. Moreover, the imperial title was acknowledged by Lord Castlereagh when he signed the ultimatum at Chaumont, acknowledging the existence of the empire and me as emperor. Second, went to Plantation House by order of the governor, whom I saw in the library. He asked a great many questions concerning my appointment as surgeon to Napoleon, and concluded by asserting that I was not his surgeon, but only tolerated to visit him. I observed that the bills which I drew for my play on the Navy Board, the form of which had been ordered by Sir George Cockburn, were awarded as surgeon to Napoleon Bonaparte and suite. I also took the liberty of asking him for what object I was at St. Helena. He asked me if I conceived myself to be independent of him as governor and of the government under whose order I acted. I replied that no British officer could be independent of the government of his country. He then asked whether I conceived myself independent of him, if it were not in his power as governor and having charge of Napoleon Bonaparte, if he thought that my conduct was not correct, to send me away if he pleased. I told him that he could reply to that himself, as he best knew what the extent of his authority was. This answer did not please him, and after walking about the room for a little time, exclaiming against my conduct, he stopped, crossed his arms, and after looking at me with an expression of countenance which I shall never forget, said, "This is my office, sir, and there's the door leading to it. When I send for you on duty, you will come in at that door. But do not put your foot in any other part of my house, or come in at any other entrance." I calmly replied that it was not for my own pleasure or my own desire that I ever set foot in any part of his house, and after suffering his paltry abuse of authority, departed. Saw Napoleon afterwards, who was nearly in the same state as yesterday. Had some conversation relative to the capture of Rome by the French. After the treaty, which I had concluded at Tolentino with that imbecile and fraudulent court of old women at Rome, said Napoleon, they endeavored by all means to assist Austrians, and even placed an Austrian general at the head of their troops. Everywhere the populace were excited by all the means generally put in practice by superstition and bigotry to massacre the French. General Dufault, who was residing at Rome as a private person, was murdered at the door of my brother Joseph, who was ambassador there. However, under all the circumstances, in concluding that a rupture with Rome would infallibly lead to one with Naples, I was of opinion that we ought only to correct and not destroy her, that we ought to demand that an example should be made of the guilty, that Prevera, the Austrian general, should be obliged to depart, and an ambassador sent to Paris to beg pardon. The Directory, however, decided that we should march against the Pope, and said that the time was come to overturn that idol. Berthier was sent with an army to revolutionize Rome and establish a republic, which was done. The people at first were transported with joy at the thought of the reestablishment of the Roman Republic, and fetes were given, and a Te Deum celebrated with great pomp. at which last a number of the cardinals attended. Although the act of reestablishment was the annihilation of the Pope's temporal power, their joy, however, was of short continuance, as the troops, who were a little restrained by the generals and excited by agents of yours and of the Austrians, commenced a scene of robbery and plundered the Vatican and the palaces of the nobles of their pictures and pieces of art of all kinds, and finished by mutinying against the imbeciles who saw the error too late and endeavored in vain to put a stop to their abuses. When the Venetians, continued Napoleon, deceived by false reports that Joubert's army had been defeated and cut to pieces, and duped by the traitorous and Machiavellian policy of the courts of Vienna, armed a number of Sclavonians and peasants, and priests preached destruction to the French and other Sicilian Vespers. All the French in Verona were massacred, and their bodies thrown into the Adige. 400 of the sick and wounded in the hospitals were barbarously murdered. In other towns in the Venetian territory, similar cruelties were practiced. As soon as they discovered that the army of Joubert was entire, that Augereau was marching against them, and finding that the Austrians, defeated everywhere, had sent to me to supplicate for peace, their fright knew no bounds. A deputation waited upon me, making the most submissive proposals, pledging themselves to agree to everything I should require, and offering me millions if I would grant their prayers. Finding this useless, orders were dispatched to their minister of Paris to corrupt the directory, in which they succeeded. As orders were sent of a nature favorable to their wishes, the dispatches of their ambassador, however, were seized and brought to me, and the whole intrigue discovered, together with the amount of the bribes they had given. I commanded the French minister to quit their territories within 24 hours and declared war against Venice, which Barragais Delier entered with his division, upset the oligarchy, and the whole of the states were soon republicanized.